as it's been a growing threat. We've passed the Neville Chamberlain moment.
Okay,
totally. It's just total bullshit. I mean, just listen. The reason why now this 60%.
Even Piers Morgan there is trying to hold in his laughter, which was kind of the whole debate between Dave Smith and Iranian singer from London, Elika Laban, on the Piers Morgan show, Piers Morgan Uncensored. The whole thing was about 45 minutes, but the clips that we're going to watch pretty much sums it up completely. This is pretty much a pro-war versus anti-war debate. So let's watch, and I'll share my thoughts afterwards.
Do you think Iran should have a nuclear bomb?
No, I don't think anybody should have nuclear weapons.
Right, but do you think in particular
Iran
Iran should have one, given how much it supports terrorist groups?
Well, I will answer that question. Let me just say the point I was making there is just that there was no imminent threat. We had more than enough time to do what the American legal system requires in this situation, which is that you bring it to Congress so that the people theoretically can have a debate through their representatives.
But actually, as you know, David, I saw AOC making that argument, and I replied to her, almost every military strike ordered by an American president this century has been done without prior congressional approval.
Yeah, but what type of argument is that, Pierce? Every war since World War II has been fought undeclared. That doesn't mean it's the proper
But the
legal,
argument is that
system.
if you go for congressional approval, inevitably it will leak out and you lose the element of surprise.
Piers has been using this defense a lot lately. The idea that, so what if Trump is not going to do things the right way? Wars haven't been declared since World War II. Why shouldn't he just continue it? That's a terrible defense. It's wrong every time, no matter who's president. You can't commit acts of war and then say it's okay because he didn't officially declare war. And he keeps bringing that up, hoping someone agrees with him or as if that's a good idea. He knows that's wrong, but he continues to use it as an excuse.
Yeah, okay, but then the argument also is that the Constitution is the supreme law of the land, and the founders very intentionally placed war-making power in the Congress because they didn't want it to be, they didn't want the president to have the war-making powers of a king. Now,
yeah, but
listen,
it does, commander-in-chief can make military strikes as well. It just can't declare war.
Yeah, well, there's some debate about that amongst constitutional scholars, but yes, but that refers to like an imminent threat, which by all accounts this wasn't. Now, listen, I don't want Iran to get a nuclear weapon. I think that everything that U.S. but basically all of U.S. and Israeli foreign policy seems to have been geared around incentivizing them to make one for about as long as I've been alive, which I think is very counterproductive. But I will say that I think there is a couple thoughts here that I think people should really consider. And number one, that I don't, I still think that Donald Trump, as great as it is that he walked us back from this, I think it was totally reckless and wrong for him to launch it to begin with. But think about this. The whole foundational claim for the Hawks' justification about Iran getting a nuke here, because obviously lots of really, really bad people have had nuclear weapons in the history of the world, and that's not a good thing. But like Joseph Stalin and Mao Zedong and like, today, current Vladimir Putin, China, I mean, there's lots of really bad regimes that have nuclear weapons. It's almost never been on the table among serious people that we ought to launch a war of aggression and choice because a regime. But the claim here is that Iran is so crazy. There are these religious fundamentalists, and self-preservation simply isn't a motivating factor for them, and therefore they can't be allowed to get it.
But you wouldn't dispute that. But you wouldn't dispute though the central argument that Israel has about it, which is that Iran has been the main sponsor for Hamas, the Houthis and Hezbollah for a number of years, all of whom are terror groups wedded to eliminating Israel. You wouldn't dispute that?
I don't dispute that they have supported those groups, and I don't dispute that that's the Israeli claim.
So isn't that right there, the existential threat to Israel?
Well, I mean, I'm sorry, but Israel, no, listen, if Israel is the only country in the Middle East who secretly has nuclear weapons and is not a member of the Non-Proliferation Treaty, and they also funded Hamas. So I'm sorry, I do not think it's a legitimate justification for them to launch a war because they claim someone else is making nukes when they're not, and also they also funded Hamas or something like that. So no.
So that's more things that Piers Morgan knows for a fact, but still uses them as excuses or defenses. The fact that Israel has secret nuclear weapons and the fact that they fund Hamas, but he uses that as a good reason for Israel and the United States to attack Iran. The same factors that apply to Israel, he's using against Iran. I'm just clarifying the evidence that proves that Piers Morgan is not just an unbiased reporter or moderator of these debates.
This isn't just about the threat of the nukes themselves. I don't think anyone's thinking to themselves that that the Islamic Republic's just going to drop a nuke as soon as it has one. The whole point of it reaching nuclear capabilities is that it becomes a deterrent state. Once it becomes a deterrent state, how are you going to deter its bad behaviors? How are you going to prevent its alliances with its regional proxies? How are you going to prevent more October 7th when everything you try to do to sanction them and contain them is met with, what are you going to do? We've got nukes. And it also prevents the containment of the region, because now UAE, Egypt, all of these other countries are so under threat that they also have to develop nuclear capabilities. So it is actually allowing them to get that far. That would be the cause of regional and global instability. So it's just preposterous to say that we should have just done nothing about that or got into another deal that just kicked the can down the road again. We are in the position that we are in because nobody contained this for as many decades as it's been a growing threat. We've passed the Neville Chamberlain moment.
Okay.
Totally. It's just total bullshit. I mean, just listen, the reason why now this 60% enrichment, which obviously for anyone paying attention there is another reason besides they were developing a nuclear weapon, which again, all of the intelligence says they had not even made the political decision that they wanted to develop a nuclear weapon yet, let alone weren't doing it. It was a chip to bargain away, which is actually what they were trying to do. They were in the middle of negotiations when Israel snuck attacked them and launched
that means you concede. Hang on. That means you concede that what they were doing was creating the impression that they were going to build a nuclear bomb.
Oh, listen, there's no question that they upped the enrichment. But listen, here's the point. They weren't allowed to, under the JCPOA. Okay. Under the JCPOA, when America was involved, they weren't allowed to enrich to this level, but they were allowed to do it if America pulled out. That's in the JCPOA agreement. And so when Donald Trump tore that up, and walked away, they brought their enrichment up. What were the negotiations, Piers, that were happening right before Israel launched their surprise attack? It was for Iran to bring the enrichment back down and America to get back in some type of agreement. They weren't going to call it the JCPOA because Donald Trump would have had to make it his own thing and not getting back into Obama's.
Trump gave them 60 days to negotiate. Trump said he got 60 days, and day 61, Israel attacked.
Right. Okay. Now, but what happened, and this was widely reported, and Donald Trump himself acknowledged this, is that the hawks insisted that you put a poison pill in the negotiations. This is what Mark Levin was freaking out about, and that the standard has to be that Iran must give up all nuclear enrichment altogether. This was always a poison pill so that the point is that Iran was willing to negotiate. And so if you really wanted to get back into that deal, Donald Trump honestly just never should have torn up the JCPOA, and we'd all be in a much better situation. It ushered in a new inspection regime. And so this is why we know that they're enriching up to 60%, because they're still in the agreement and they still have the inspections, unlike Israel.
Let me ask you.
No matter how you feel about Dave Smith, him being anti-war is a consistent theme with all his appearances. That seems to be his main focus. And because we're on the brink of World War III, it seems to be a very good one. Piers and Elika want to make it seem like making peace deals and having treaties is such a bad thing, where she even says more treaties just to kick the can down the road 10 or 15 years. In 10 or 15 years, all of the people in power right now are not going to be at play anymore. So it will be a new regime, a new group of people to once and for all create some lasting peace. All the people in power right now in the United States, Iran, and Israel are the ones amping this up, especially the United States and Israel. So far, the Iranians are the only logical ones. It was Trump that ripped up the nuclear deal. It wasn't Iran. They only went up to 60% because they were allowed to if the United States backed out, which is what happened. But Elika's not here to talk about facts. She's just here to appeal to fear.
Let me ask you this. I'm sure since you know about the JCPOA, I'm sure you know that it was replete with sunset provisions for up to 10 to 15 years, where all of those containment would be expired, and they would have more than $150 billion to continue developing their missiles and nuclear programs. The JCPOA was never a solution. Not only that, but not only did they inherit more than $100 billion, they were also able to expand their regional terror. They were and Khamenei repeatedly came on television and said, we are going to use that money to fund our allies. So there was actually a backdoor to the JCPOA where the regime, the Islamic Republic, was able to expand its regional influence and fund its allies, which eventually led to October 7th, which eventually brought us to where we are now. So yes, the JCPOA did intend to temporarily constrain their nuclear abilities, but it was always understood that by the time it expired, they would be $150 billion richer, their proxies would be fortified, they would have been responsible for significant regional destabilization, and then they would be able to enrich if they wanted to. And the only way to prevent that was to get into another nuclear deal, which would require unfreezing hundreds and billions of more. So they would just keep getting enriched, rich and empowered. So the question is, how does this end? Just a lifetime of JCPOAs?
Well, let me ask a question just to end this, because we've run out of time.
Right before we get to the last part, she mentions unfreezing $150 billion. That's not giving them $150 billion. That's not gifting them. That's not them winning a prize. It's their money. Obama froze their money. And if they stick within the deal, they get their own money back unfrozen, because we reached into their pockets and said, you can't have access to this money until you sign this deal, and then not until you prove that you've played ball within this deal, which they have. So the idea of them getting money to do all this other stuff is bullshit. It was always their money that we froze just so that they played ball, and they did. If Trump makes that deal, he's heralded as a great deal maker. But because it was somebody else, it was a terrible deal that had to be ripped up. Nonsense. But let's get back to it.
Dave, hang on. Let me put a question to Dave, which is that if it turns out that all this activity in the last 2 weeks drives Iran to the negotiating table, they do agree to give up a lot of their enriched uranium and so on, reduce it back to civilian levels and so on, and there is a period of sustained peace in the region, and the Gaza hell is brought to an end as well, and in 6 months' time, all this is over. Should Donald Trump get the Nobel Peace Prize? Because Barack Obama got one 8 months into his tenure for basically just doing a bit of fancy chat about world peace.
Well, I guess grading on the Obama curve, everybody deserves a Nobel Peace Prize. I mean, literally, the three of us are much better candidates than Barack Obama was. So judging on that curve. No, look, I mean, I think that would be great if that's the result of all of this. I think that what Donald Trump's policy was so reckless, and it had such a risk. And this is what I was trying to get at before that I hope people appreciate. Look, if Iran had not made the calculation to give advanced warning and had just fired off missiles the way they did into Israel. But this is the whole point, Piers.
I think Trump called their bluff. I think Trump called their bluff because he realized that what Israel had done over a period of days is expose the Iranian regime as having a military that was a dud.
Piers,
couldn't even deal with what Israel was flying at.
They don't want to be destroyed. They would rather rule than be destroyed.
Exactly.
But the point is that we put this in the hands of the Iranian government. If they hadn't done that, we may have had to launch a full regime. What would Donald Trump have done if 50 or 100 Americans had been killed in an Iranian attack?
Well, thankfully, we
risked a catastrophe.
Thankfully, that hasn't happened because Iran was so panicky, they actually gave prior warnings to everybody to make sure it didn't happen.
So maybe they're not such a scary threat after all.
Well, that's an interesting point if you take away their nuclear weapons.
But they don't have nuclear weapons. If they're so reckless and their threat is so imminent, why would we put the ball in their court? Why would we allow them to start World War III by attacking them first and hoping that they don't attack back? And then when they don't, you say, oh, they were so panicky. So are they reckless or are they actually reasonable? It can't be both. But even when giving credit, Piers has to throw in a BS line like, well, if you take away their nuclear weapons, they don't have any. They don't have any. It was nonsense. It was a lie just to try to get us into something. And when they didn't take the bait, we're begging them to get back into the negotiating tables. But Israel killed their main negotiators. Israel and the United States don't want to negotiate. They just want to start something, but try to make it seem like Iran are the irrational party in this situation, when that's clearly not the case. But talking about irrational, Elika goes off.
Elika, final word to you, very quickly.
Yes. okay, your whole point, this whole conversation and everything that you've been saying online is that Israel is engaging in terrorism, ethnic cleansing, all of these things that you claim to be against. And yet you are so happy to engage in these deals that enrich the Islamic Republic and its machinery of oppression to hang and lynch and torture women. So if you're so against if you're so against what Israel is doing, if you're so against funding what Israel is doing, why are you so happy to fund this regime in its domestic and regional terror by the same means of empowering them with money through the diplomatic?
I know, it's crazy. It's almost like I'm opposing war across the board.
You're opposing war by actually
all of these
supporting
wars. Why would that be?
So you're opposing war, okay, opposing war, like by first of all instigating more war down the road, okay, that's the Neville Chamberlain moment.
You're just asserting that, it's nonsense.
Second of
No,
all,
it's not
you
a
are
fact. A prediction of the future is not a fact. Please.
You are happy for Iranians to be slaughtered, raped, killed, and hanged, so long as in your fantasy world you're opposing war, but you're not okay with it in Gaza.
Pierce.
But you're not okay with it in Gaza. You're an idiot.
Maybe you got a friend who's better.
Okay.
There's everyone's better than your stupidity. You are the most demoralized, brain-rotted idiot alive. Thank you.
All right, take a deep breath.
Thank you both very much indeed. I appreciate it.
What a perfect freeze frame. It just encapsulates the whole thing. Dave could do nothing but laugh because he came in with one goal and stuck to it the whole time. To be fair, they both had their own goals and stuck to it the whole time. But clearly, Elika is against diplomacy, which goes to show that in this video right here, Cenk did actually win the debate against Kyle Kalinske and Crystal Ball, which was about the strategy of coalition building around being anti-war. Dave Smith just proves that some people are actually principled. And even if we disagree on other topics, this issue is so huge and monumental that it's more important than everything else. And it's worth building a coalition around. And if you're still watching this video, you might as well hit the like and subscribe to the channel. Peace.